Welcome to Starborn Saga. Get ready to witness humanity's greatest secrets unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. Anyone who's spent time navigating the labyrinthian rules of intergalactic diplomacy can tell you this much. Trying to explain the concept of spicy food to a methane-breathing aeropod is like trying to teach a nebula how to salsa dance. You might succeed, but only after a lot of confusion, some explosions, and possibly violating local laws of physics. It's that very conundrum that makes interspecies education such a sprawling bureaucratic chaos. Yet somehow, defying all odds and common sense, there they were. The latest participant in the Galactic University's infamous exchange program slouched casually in the grand atrium, managing to violate several principles of interdimensional xenobiology simply by existing. The university itself was a monument to both diversity and high-functioning chaos. Its vaulted halls were designed to accommodate everything from plasma-based entities hovering in sparkling clouds to crystalline hive minds buzzing in synchronous vibrations. The air vibrated with a cacophony of countless overlapping conversations, each occurring in dimensions far beyond the average species' comprehension. Holographic schedules floated in the ether, shimmering in at least 17 different temporal formats, and just for good measure, quantum probability fields hummed softly, ensuring that students didn't unintentionally phase through each other on their way to class. You still rely on verbal communication. The admissions officer's translation matrix rendered their words in a tone hovering between mild curiosity and faint disdain. Their tentacles, waving either in pity or aggravated indigestion, added to the moment's awkwardness. How quaint. The human exchange student, whose name most beings couldn't pronounce without risking a minor temporal rift, just smiled. That smile, revealing teeth, was another human oddity that nettled their peers. Most species considered baring teeth a direct prelude to dismemberment, but for humans it was just politeness. "We find it effective enough," the student said, watching as their class schedule materialized in the air before them. Advanced quantum mechanics, transdimensional ethics, and, bafflingly, survival strategies for carbon-based lifeforms. The lineup promised an eventful semester. Those first weeks were, to put it mildly, an experiment in mutual confusion. While most species had long since transcended the need for sleep, humans' reliance on unconscious recovery periods sparked endless debate amongst the scholarly elite. Entire research papers were hurriedly published on the inefficiencies of human biology, spearheaded by the hive mind students who found the idea of nightly individual shutdowns both fascinating and horrifying. Then came advanced quantum mechanics, where the human's natural inability to perceive beyond 3 dimensions caused no small amount of trouble. Their solution, aggressive improvisation. "Just because I can't see it," they'd mutter under their breath. "Surrounded by floating equations and what passed as coffee, doesn't mean I can't calculate it." This impromptu motto became an inside joke among their classmates, earning them both admiration and bemusement. But it was transdimensional ethics that truly tested their mettle. Every debate felt like performing linguistic gymnastics while being heckled by 1,000 time-traveling spectators. The discussion of moral responsibilities for time travelers, for example, often left the human as a target of both mockery and intrigue. Their insistence on linear time was incomprehensibly quaint to beings who effortlessly navigated centuries within a single thought. Despite these challenges, it was survival strategies that stood out as the strangest class of all. The instructor, a luminous being composed entirely of structured light, quickly zeroed in on humanity's most baffling survival tool. "You continue functioning through extreme damage." Out of sheer annoyance, they inquired, their voice resonating with the classroom's flickering tones. "Well, that's a bit of an oversimplification," the human replied, scribbling notes with an actual pen, much to the apparent horror of their technologically advanced peers. "But, yes." The temperature in the room fluctuated, a subtle indication of unease among the energy-based classmates. A crystalline entity in the back began humming anxiously at a frequency bordering on ultrasonic. The human, somehow unbothered, continued jotting down observations. Over time, the galaxy's strangest melting pot began to shift. Students who had once formed rigid cliques based on species or biology found themselves drawn to the human's refreshingly pragmatic approach to life. To them, what seemed simplistic was oddly effective. However, not everyone saw humanity's straightforwardness in a positive light. Rumblings of division began creeping into conversations. Tensions spiked dramatically after a failed cafeteria experiment to synthesize pizza resulted in an interspecies Uproar over capsaicin, the infamous molecule responsible for spice. The incident made headlines in neural network news feeds and was followed by troubling reports of unrest among the galaxy's powers. Naturally, the human noticed while they lacked the psychic abilities that many species flaunted. Their knack for reading the proverbial room was unparalleled. And this particular room, it was frosty, both literally and figuratively. By the time the semester's midpoint arrived, tensions were impossible to ignore. During one especially heated transdimensional ethics debate, the human couldn't help but notice how their classmates were subtly rearranging themselves. Fluctuating energy currents and gravitational signals buzzed like unspoken conspiracies. The kind of conspiracies that, by all accounts, tended to end poorly. Perhaps the human offered their voice, cutting through the clamor. We should focus on practical applications instead of abstract theory. The suggestion hung in the air, heavy with paradox. Bioluminescent beings flickered through colors of what might have been contemplation, disdain, or mild digestive distress. Typical carbon-based simplification muttered something that existed predominantly in ultraviolet wavelengths. The human, resisting the urge to roll their eyes, instead returned their attention to their notes. Quantum equations suggested there was a 73.2% chance things would escalate before improving, that they were right. Political rifts crystallized. Factions emerged, with students clustering into ideological and species-aligned groups. The cafeteria became a battlefield of ambient clashes, while theoretical discussions turned into thinly veiled jabs between galactic powers. Even faculty joined in, peppering their lectures with thinly disguised critiques of interdimensional politics. That the breaking point arrived not with a whisper, but with a thunderclap. A routine presentation escalated in ways that no one, human or otherwise, could have predicted. Just as the saying goes, in certain galaxies, sometimes, the simplest element can ignite the greatest chaos. A group of students from the Carina arm were discussing their research on efficient governance. Models 1, a question about resource distribution algorithms sparked what could only be described as a quantum political meltdown. Your entire premise is based on outdated gravitational slip, shouted a student composed primarily of dark matter, their outline becoming dangerously undefined with emotion gravitational principles, a collective of synchronized impulsed. Aggressive at least, we don't base our society on theories that violate basic conservation laws. The human watched as the classroom's probability field began to destabilize. Their quantum physics training might have been primitive by galactic standards, but they could recognize a chain reaction when they saw one around the room. Students were taking sides. Plasm-based entities began ionizing defensively. The crystalline students' molecular structures started resonating at frequencies that definitely weren't interpreted by the university's safety protocols. Even the usually peaceful gas clouds were condensing into ominously specific shapes. The instructor, a being that existed primarily as a complex mathematical equation, tried to restore order. By projecting calming prime numbers into the quantum field, it wasn't working. Your species' approach to particle physics is as flawed as your political structure. Someone had abandoned all pretense of academic discourse and moved straight to fundamental forces. Insults. Humans' hands shot up again, not because they had a solution, but because they recognized the unique opportunity a species perceived presented. Sometimes the best way to deal with advanced civilization's problems was with simple solutions. Actually, they began drawing attention from the increasingly agitated collection of matter, energy, and quantum probabilities. Have a question about something that might be relevant. The room's focus shifted, temporarily distracted from the impending physics-political crisis by the novelty of a simple species attempting to contribute to such an advanced discussion. What happened next would be recorded in the university's archives as either a brilliant example of crisis management or the most audacious display of human chaos. Theory ever witnessed in an academic setting. Possibly both. The humans smiled, showing those disconcerting teeth again, and prepared to demonstrate why their species had survived despite the primitive understanding of the universe. Sometimes the most effective solution wasn't the most advanced one, it was the one that made everyone stop and think, wait, what? As the saying went, in certain parts of the galaxy, the most dangerous thing in the universe isn't the most powerful force, it's the one you underestimate. If anyone had told the university's quantum probability analysts that galactic war would break out during a lecture on multidimensional approaches to cognitive evolution, they would have calculated the odds as astronomically low. Then again, they hadn't factored in human variable, a notorious oversight in many advanced civilizations. Lecture hall hummed with barely contained tension as Professor Zelek, whose true name contained 7 quantum states and a taste of purple, began their presentation. The room's holographic displays showed real-time updates from various galactic news feeds, each more concerning than the last, as we can observe in Figure 7. 3b. The professor's voice, reason a tedra, multiple dimensions, the evolution of consciousness across species shows remarkable convergence. 1. They never finished that sentence. The emergency broadcast cut through all frequencies, dimensions, and states of matter simultaneously. The Arcturus Coletius initiated quantum political separation protocols. All diplomatic channels have been severed. This is not a simulation for a moment. The entire room existed in a state of quantum uncertainty then. Like a wave function collapsing, chaos erupted. The crystalline atoms shattered into their combat formations, their lattices realigning into aggressive patterns. Plasma-based entities began rapid ionization, their emotional states manifesting as dangerous energy fluctuations. The gaseous students expanded to fill their available space, forcing others to withdraw into higher dimensions. The collective's actions are completely justified. A student composed of structured light began emitting in the gamma range, causing several nearby quantum shields to activate. Justified. A cloud of sentient nanobots swarmed into an angry configuration. This is a clear violation of the transdimensional accords. The human who had been quietly taking notes about cognitive evolution and doodling in the margins, a habit that horrified their more evolved classmates, watched as their advanced civilization classmates routed to their basic tribal instincts. It was oddly comforting to know that some things were universal. Professor Zilak attempted to restore order by projecting a coming quantum field, but it was too late. The classroom had become a microcosm of Thelagar galactic conflict with species, quickly aligning themselves along political, physical lines. A group of silicon-based students began a complex ritual that would allow them to merge into a unified combat form. The energy beings were condensing into weapons-grade plasma. Even the usually peaceful hive minds were linking into battle configurations. The human noticed that the classroom's probability field was becoming dangerously unstable. According to their calculations, done the primitive way with actual numbers, they had about 3 minutes before someone did something irreversibly stupid. That's when the first attack came. A burst of focused cognitive energy from one of the quantum consciousness collectives struck a crystalline student, causing them to resonate at their critical frequency. Their assaulting harmonic cascade threatened to shatter every molecular structure within range. The human ducked under their desk net out of fear, but because experience had taught them that the best view of chaos often comes from ground-level plus-tier species, had excellent experience in using furniture as improvised shelter. Your political structure is as unstable as your electron configuration, shouted someone composite promare of dark matter, hurling what appeared to be a small quantum singularity across the room. The human watched as their classmates, beings capable of manipulating the fundamental forces of the universe, devolved into was essentially a multi-dimensional food fight. If the situation weren't so dangerous, it would have been hilarious. Professor Zilak's form was between 7 different states of panic as they tried to activate the classroom's emergency content fields. Unfortunately, several students had already hacked a quantum barrier, proving that some skills were universal regardless of species. The human's hand shot up again. Not that anyone was paying attention to prehistoric, gesture-based communication anymore. They had an idea. It wasn't a particularly advanced idea. In fact, it was the kind of idea that would probably make their quantum physics professors cry, but sometimes the best solutions were the simple ones. Excuse me. They called out, their voice somehow cutting through the chaos of battle cries in 17 different dimensional frequencies. I have a question about things. The fighting paused briefly. In any academic setting across the universe, if those words had power, this will be on the exam. A collective of sympathizants pulsed uncertainly. The humans stood up, brushing off their clothes with deliberate. Well, I was wondering about the practical application portion. Yaukno, the one worth 60% of our final grade. The room's probability field shifted as thousands of advanced minds suddenly redirected their attention from war to something far more important. Achievement, because the human continuing how their species' talent for bore sessions translated beautifully to advanced sodorization. I'm not sure how we're supposed to demonstrate understanding of multidimensional cognitive evolution. I've all stuck in detention for violating the university's non-proliferation protocols. A wave of quantum uncertainty swept through the room as students began rapidly calculating the impact of disciplinary actions on their grade point averages. Additionally, They added warming to their theme, I believe engaging in unauthorized warfare during class. Ours violates at least 7 sections of the academic honor code. That's an automatic course failure, right? The silicon-based students began to decouple from their combat formation. The plasma entities cooled their ionization states. Even etheric matter student retrieved their quantum singularity, looking as sheepish as a being of pure gravitationalence could look, not to mention the human delivered their coup de grace. This would look really bad on our graduate school applications, and just like that the tension broke the probability field stability as students began returning to their original states, quantum weapons disappearing into various dimensional pockets. Professor Selak, whose form had finally settled on a relieved shade of ultraviolet, seized the moment. Yes, excellent point. Let's return to our discussion of cognitive evolution, specifically focusing on the role of rational thought. In crisis management, the humans sat back down, hiding a smiley as their classmates awkwardly rearranged themselves into something resembling academic order around them. The advanced civilization that had been on the brink of war was now more concerned with taking notes and updating their study schedules. News feeds continued to flash alerts about the growing galactic crisis, but within the lecture hall a different kind of evolution was taking place. Students who had been ready to atomize each other moments ago were now sharing quantum computation spaces, working together to understand the complexities that would definitely be on the final exam. The human pulled out the primitive notebook and began writing again, adding a new observation to their growing list of universal constants. No matter how advanced a civilization becomes, no matter how many dimensions they could exist in simultaneously, nobody wants to repeat a course. As the professor resumed their lecture, now incorporating recent events as practical examples of cognitive evolution, or lack thereof, the human couldn't help but appreciate the irony. They were supposedly the least evolved being in the room, watching as their advanced classmates learned Alice and their species had figured out long ago. Sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to remind everyone they have homework due. The galactic conflict would eventually resolve itself, as these things often did, but the legend of the human who prevented a classroom war with nothing but academic anxiety would live on in university folklore. It even made it into the next edition of the xenobiology textbook under the chapter Primitive Wisdom When Simple Solutions Work. As the saying went in certain parts of the galaxy, the most evolved response isn't always the most effective one. Sometimes you just need to remind people about their GP. In the aftermath of what Beckham known as the lecture hall incident, or that time we almost started a war over homework, university's administration found themselves dealing with an unexpected paradigm shift. The incident had been recorded in roughly 47 different dimensional frequencies, making it impossible to pretend it hadn't happened, though. Several quantum probability specialists tried. The faculty lounge buzzed with discussions about the implications of a primitive species successfully diffusing a situation that could have violated several laws of physics. The debate was particularly heated among the theoretical physics professors, who were struggling to reconcile their complex models of civilizational advancement with the effectiveness of simple academic anxiety. Perhaps, suggested one professor whose form consisted entirely of mathematical equations, we should reevaluate our definition of advanced problem-solving methodology. The human, meanwhile, had become something of a reluctant celebrity. Their classmates, who had previously regarded them with a mixture of pity and anthropological interest, now viewed them with a new kind of respect. It turned out that preventing an interdimensional incident was worth quite a few extra credit points. Your species' ability to weaponize administrate consequences is fascinating, commented a collective of quantum consciousness during study group. We had not considered the defensive applications of bureaucracy. The human just shrugged, a gesture that had come unexpectedly popular among the more flexible species. Sometimes the best way to stop people from doing something stupid is to remind them about the paperwork. The broader galactic conflict began to shift as well, though not for the reasons anyone expected. News of the classroom incident had leaked into the diplomatic channels, causing several high-ranking officials to reconsider their positions, not because they were impressed by the humans' wisdom, but because they were terrified of appearing less evolved than a primitive species. If a carbon-based pre-quantum civilization can resolve conflicts with resorting to dimensional warfare, noted one, particularly in being, perhaps we should reconsider our approach. The university seized the opportunity to turn the whole thing into a teaching moment. New courses were added to the curriculum: primitive problem solving in advanced contexts and simplified solutions. Too complex quantum social issues, the human was asked to give guest lectures, during which they mostly explained concepts like common sense, under not making things more complicated than they need to be. Even the cafeteria conked species that had been segregating themselves along political physical lines began mixing, again leading to some interesting culinary experiments. The humans' suggestion of just talking to each other over food was hailed as a breakthrough in xenociology, though several students required emergency quantum stabilization. After attempting to understand the concept of comfort food, the academic's year was drawing to a close, and the human was preparing for their final examinations, when they received an unexpected invitation. The Galactic Council of Higher Education wanted them to present their observations on interspecies conflict resolution, standing before the council whose members existed in several dimensions simultaneously and could probably unmake a reality with a thought. The human delivered what would become known as "they keep it simple, stupid" speech, though the translation matrices struggled with the concept of stupid and eventually settled on unnecessarily biggest thing is they explained to the assembled beings of unimaginable power and intelligence, sometimes you're so busy looking for advanced solutions that you miss the obvious ones. Yes, quantum physics is impressive, but have you tried just talking things out over coffee? The council's response was recorded in the official minutes as prolonged multi-dimensional contemplation. Thoth humans suspected it was more like stunned silence. In the end, the university changed its exchange program parameters. Instead of focusing solely on civilizations, they began actively recruiting species that could offer alternative problem-solving perspectives. The humans' successful completion of their exchange year had proved that sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected sources. As they packed up their dorm room, which had required special modification to accommodate their need for linear time and regular unconsciousness periods, the human reflected on their year among thesters. They had learned advanced quantum mechanics, witnessed the near outbreak of galactic war, and somehow managed to maintain a decent grade point average. Through it all, their final evaluation read, despite significant biological and evolutionary limitations, subject demonstrate remarkable ability to apply simplified problem-solving methodologies to complex quantum social scenarios. Continue observation of human species for further insights into the effectiveness of primitive wisdom in advanced contexts. The human wrote their own evaluation too, though they never submitted it. Turns out the most advanced civilizations in the universe still haven't figured out that sometimes the simplest solution is the right one. Also, dear coffee is terrible. As they prepared to return to Earth, their classmates organized a farewell gathering carefully scheduled around their strange need for sleep. The event was marked by an unprecedented level of interspecies mingling with even traditional enemies, sharing what the cafeteria claimed was pizza. Professor Zelok, who had finally mastered the art of existing in just one dimension at a time, when talking to their human student, offered a final observation. Perps, the true measure of advancement isn't how complex we can make things, but how simple we dare to keep them. The human just smiled, showing those still disconcerting teeth. Or maybe everyone just needs to remember that at the end of the day we all have homework to do. So ended the year that proved that in a universe of quantum uncertainty, multidimensional politics, and advanced civilizations, sometimes the most evolved solution is remembering the basics. As human departed, leaving behind a slightly humbler, slightly wiser galactic community, a new saying began circulating through the university: when in doubt, ask yours or foot what a primitive do.